Well, thanks very much, and it's great to be back in Moscow. I'm going to start with just a story about my first visit to Moscow, and then I'll get into the more organized remarks. My first visit to Moscow was when I was in high school, and I was running for Idaho State Student Council president. I was at Boise High, and we come up here, and all the Boise schools were supporting me, and we get up here, and there's a guy running for Nels High School, and his campaign is being managed by Betty Richardson, former U.S. attorney, former candidate for Congress. And I lost that election. But I'm delighted to tell you that Betty Richardson is my campaign manager. And one more thing about Betty. She also ran my good friend Mike Burkett's campaign when he beat Jim Risch for the Ada County State Senate seat back in 1988. This election is not just about, Nels Mitchell running against Jim Risch or Shirley Ringo running against Raul Labrador. What it's about is the direction that we want to go as a state and the direction that we want to go as a country. I wanted to talk first a little bit about Shirley. As all of you know, she's been in the legislature for 14 years. She is known as one of the best and most effective legislators that we've had. And the last few years she's been on JFAC, which is probably the most challenging committee in the state and the most important in our legislature, because that's where rhetoric falls away and reality takes over. And it must be really challenging dealing with some of the ideologues that we've got in the legislature. And one of the many reasons I admire Shirley is she was able to be there for 14 years dealing with those folks. But I forgot, I was supposed to give a shout out to some of the other legislators. I wanted to acknowledge John Mushi, our minority leader. Along with Shirley, two of the three best people that we have down in Boise for the legislature. And I also wanted to acknowledge Paulette Jordan and Gary Osborne. Now, some of you may not realize this, but Shirley has received two honors over the course of this last week. First of all, she received the endorsement of Lily Ledbetter. In addition, she was once again at the bottom of the Idaho Freedom Foundation. And I don't know how they rated it, but she was able to, her score was a minus 74. Two honors to be very proud of. Now, in working with Shirley on our campaign,
thank you, sir.
I've also had the opportunity to get to know Stacy, who was really terrific, and I think it's wonderful that she has returned home to Idaho in order to work on her mother's campaign. And one of the things that Stacy told me, which kind of reminded me of my daughter, is she never intended to follow in her mother's footsteps. But of course now she's getting her PhD in education. When I have two adult daughters, and when they were growing up, they said, boy, Dad works too hard. I'm never going to be a lawyer. And my oldest daughter is a practicing lawyer, and my youngest daughter is now in law school. So it happens to, I think, a lot of daughters. I graduated from the University of Idaho Law School in 1978. Between my two brothers and myself, we have 4 degrees from the University of Idaho, and yes, they were great times up here, and it was also fun to be up here with both my brothers at the same time. I'm very loyal to the University of Idaho. I've had the privilege to serve on the advisory council for the law school, and interestingly enough, I served on that with Jim Rich for 6 years. He attended one meeting, and yet in his voter profile for the Statesman that was published this morning, he said that was one of his civic accomplishments, but he didn't even know what the name of it was. He said it was the board of directors for the University of Idaho Law School. Well, we don't have one. We had an advisory council, but if you only show up once in 6 years, I guess you don't know what all right. Yeah. I've also been teaching part-time at the University of Idaho for the last 10 years. I teach trial advocacy, which is a course that's taught in the summer. And I've also, for the last, I started that in 2004. And I've also been teaching remedies. And 2/3 of my students are up here in Moscow, and 1/3 are in Boise. And it's really been a terrific honor to have the opportunity. When I was in law school, I thought the last thing they'd ever asked me to do was come back and teach a class. They were pretty desperate 10 years ago when they asked me, and they keep asking me back every year. I've been a lawyer for over 30 years. I did have a federal position. I was the enforcement director and regional trial counsel for the SEC. For the Western United States, and in that capacity, I worked with local, state, and federal law enforcement, protecting the public from financial fraud. I think it's given me an additional understanding of the way the federal government works, having served in that position. Now, a lot of people have asked both Shirley and I, why are you doing this? Why And my wife actually asked that for several months, but she's no longer asking. It's all about timing. But
thank you, sir.
You know, and that is a good question. But once you look at the people that Shirley and I are running against, I think you will understand. It is the right thing to do. Raul Labrador is, of course, the Tea Party darling. You know, we see he even appears on TV and has this high profile, and you know, he is one of the stars of the Tea Party. He even thinks he's powerful enough to take on the speaker. For what end, I don't know. Jim Rich he doesn't call himself a member of the Tea Party. And the reason I guess he doesn't is he's more extreme than the Tea Party. He's been voted the most conservative member of the U.S. Senate the last 2 years. So he's to the right of Mike Lee and Ted Cruz. So both of our opponents are these extremists. They're not the mainstream Republicans that we used to have in this state. They're extremists. And when you take a look at what they've done on the issues that are important to Idaho, I think you'll agree with me. Both Raul Labrador and Jim Rich were part of this coterie that thought it was okay to shut down our government for 16 days, which cost us, the taxpayers, $24 billion. When I was considering entering the race, that was one of the tipping points, because I thought that was one of the most reckless and irresponsible things that has come out of Washington in my life. In addition, both Raul Labrador and Jim Rich have voted against jobs for Idaho. Both of them voted against the budget, which included funds for jobs in Idaho. when Shirley and I are back in Washington, we're going to focus on Idaho. We're going to focus on the national economy, but also making sure that we're advocates for Idaho and Idaho jobs and the Idaho economy. We have not had that type of representation back in Washington of Idaho in a long time. Another important issue to all of us in Idaho is our public lands. Those public lands belong to all of us. Well, Raoul Labrador and Jim Risch, I think, have a slightly different view than the rest of us. Jim Risch has been blocking protection for the Boulder white clouds for the last 5.5 years. And now Raoul Labrador has jumped on that bandwagon, and he is opposed to protecting the Boulder white clouds as well. Well, you know, those public lands belong to all of us. And more recently, they have now decided that they're going to privatize the whole Upper Lochsaw land swap. And so they told the Forest Service, you know, to stand back, that they're going to do a legislative solution. They're going to do a legislative solution that's behind closed doors, that the public, the stakeholders, do not have a chance to participate in. We need representatives in Washington like Shirley and myself, and we're going to make sure that the stakeholders, the interested parties here in Idaho, know what's going on, and that we don't have any backroom deals and the kind of crony capitalism that is involved with what they're doing with the Upper Lochsaw. And I could probably go on forever, but I'm just going to touch on one other subject in terms of Raoul Labrador and Jim Risch. And that's the fact that they're both part of what has been characterized as the war on women.
Yeah.
And I looked this up, and they both have a 100% rating from an outfit called Concerned Women for America. Well, let me tell you about Concerned Women for America. This is the type of special interest group that they're playing to. Concerned Women for America are opposed to sex education, child care funding, birth control as a part of health insurance, and they even filed an amicus brief in support of the Hobby Lobby case more recently. So when we're asked why we're running, all we have to do is say, because of the issues, and it's the right thing to do. Now, another thing that Shirley and I are asked a lot is, well, yeah, but can you win? You know, this is a Republican state. Isn't Idaho a Republican state? And I say, well, you know, the Democrats are in the minority, but so are the Republicans. You got to remember, in Idaho, 58 to 60% of the voters are not affiliated with either party. It's the people in the middle. It's those people who are going to decide the election. That's what creates the opportunity here in Idaho. Remember how resoundingly the Luna legislation was defeated by Idaho voters. When the Republicans go too far to the extreme, it creates the opportunity for us. And both Jim Risch and Raoul Labrador are too far to that extreme. So yes, the election can be won. And I also wanted to share, my campaign did a poll a couple months ago, and I wouldn't be surprised if when Shirley does a poll, she will find the same thing. We asked over 750 Idaho voters, should Jim Risch be reelected? And 36% said, yes, Jim Risch should be reelected. 16% said, well, I don't know, I haven't really thought about it. 48% said, it's time for somebody new. My full-time job from now until November 4th is convincing the Idaho voters that I'm going to be somebody new. And Shirley, working with Shirley to try and convince the Idaho voters that she's the somebody new that should be taking Raoul Labrador's place as well. run a campaign where the Koch brothers are going to come in and support us. You know? And actually, they've already come in to support Jim Risch, and I'm sure they'll probably come in to help Raul as well. Well, we're going to win it because we're going to have more people working on our campaigns. We're going to have more volunteers. We're going to have more grassroots support. That's how we're going to win it. And to the extent that, you know, we still are small enough, we talk with our friends and neighbors, talk with those independent voters that you know. Convince them that it is in their interest, in the interest of Idaho, the people in Idaho, to support Shirley, myself, and the other Democrats that are running this year. It's an honor for me to have this opportunity to run for the U.S. Senate. And it's also an honor to have the opportunity to be working with somebody like Shirley Ringo, our next congressperson from the 1st District. Yeah.